The insurance policy, how Susie Wiles used Epstein files to survive Trump's White House. The email was sent at 11:43 p.m. on a Wednesday. Subject line, Our conversation today. Two recipients, Donald J. Trump and his personal attorney. No CC, no BCC. Just three people who would read the most explosive message ever sent from a White House chief of staff to a sitting president. The body of the email was brief, 4 paragraphs, 173 words that would change everything. Mr. President, after our discussion this afternoon, I want to be clear about my position. I have served you loyally and will continue to do so. However, if you choose to terminate my employment, I want you to understand that I have preserved certain documents in accordance with federal records law. These documents include materials related to your previous association with Jeffrey Epstein, as well as contemporaneous records of conversations we've had about managing this issue. These records are currently held by my personal attorney in a secure location. They will remain private as long as I remain in my position. I hope this clarifies the situation. Respectfully, Susie. It was polite, professional, and it was blackmail. When the email leaked to the Washington Post 6 weeks later, it triggered the biggest scandal of Trump's second term, not just because the White House chief of staff was threatening the president, but because of what the email revealed. Trump had been trying to fire Wiles for weeks, and the only thing stopping him was her possession of documents he desperately wanted buried, documents about Epstein, documents about cover-ups, documents that could end his presidency. But to understand how Susie Wiles, the most disciplined, loyal, and effective chief of staff in modern history, ended up threatening her boss with exposure, you need to know what happened in the 6 months before that email was sent, the 6 months when she discovered exactly who she was working for. The discovery that changed everything. Susie Wiles became White House Chief of Staff on January 20th, 2025. She was 67 years old, a veteran Republican operative who'd run Trump's most successful campaign. She was known for 3 things: discipline, discretion, and an almost supernatural ability to manage chaos. Everyone assumed she'd be the adult in the room, the person who could control Trump's impulses, manage his schedule, and prevent the kind of staff dysfunction that had plagued his first term. For the first 2 months, it worked. Wiles imposed structure. She limited access to the Oval Office. She reviewed every executive order before Trump signed it. She built relationships with Congress. The White House, for once, functioned like a normal administration. Then came March 12, 2025. That morning, Wiles received a call from the FBI Director's Office requesting an urgent meeting. It was unusual. The director typically dealt with the National Security Advisor, or directly with the President. But the message was clear. This was sensitive, and it needed to involve the Chief of Staff. The meeting took place in the White House Situation Room at 2:00 p.m. Present, FBI Director, Deputy Director, White House Counsel, and Susie Wiles. No one else, no note-takers, no recordings. The FBI Director opened a classified binder and slid it across the table. Ms. Wiles, we need to brief you on a situation. As you know, we've been conducting a review of materials seized from Jeffrey Epstein's properties. During that review, we've identified documents and photographs that reference President Trump. Most of it is innocuous. Party photos, business meeting records from the 1990s and early 2000s. But there are some items that could be problematic if they became public. Wiles opened the binder. The first page was a photograph. Trump and Epstein at Mar-a-Lago, 1997. Nothing unusual. But as she flipped through, the images got more concerning. Trump and Epstein on a private plane. Trump and Epstein at what appeared to be a private party with several young women in the background. Trump and Epstein shaking hands with a Saudi businessman who was later investigated for human trafficking. Then came the documents, phone records showing over 60 calls between Trump and Epstein between 1995 and 2004. Financial records showing Trump's company had paid consulting fees to an Epstein-linked shell company. And, most damning, a handwritten note from Epstein's personal ledger that read, "DT, introduced to new model candidates for pageant, will arrange." DT was Donald Trump, and new model candidates meant teenage girls competing in Miss Teen USA, a pageant Trump owned at the time. The FBI director continued, "We have no evidence of criminal activity by the president, but these materials could be misinterpreted, and there are members of Congress who've requested access to all Epstein-related documents through official channels. We wanted to give you a heads up before any of this becomes public." Wiles felt her stomach drop. She'd known Trump had associated with Epstein. Everyone in his orbit back then had. But this wasn't just casual association. This was documented, repeated, and potentially explosive. "Does the president know about this?" she asked. "We briefed him 2 days ago." "And he didn't tell me?" The FBI director and White House counsel exchanged glances. That told Wiles everything she needed to know. Trump had been hiding this from his own chief of staff. The confrontation that started the war. Wiles went directly to the Oval Office after the FBI left. Trump was on the phone with a donor. She waited outside. When he hung up, she walked in and closed the door. "We need to talk about the Epstein briefing." Trump's expression changed instantly. "They told you? Why didn't you?" "Because I didn't want you to worry. It's nothing. Old photos, meaningless." 60 phone calls is not nothing. Consulting fees to his shell companies is not nothing. A note about introducing you to teenage girls is not nothing. Trump stood up. "Susie, I'm telling you, it's all being blown out of proportion. Yes, I knew Epstein. Half of New York knew Epstein. He was at parties, events, fundraisers. That's what people did back then." "What about the note? New model candidates for pageant?" "I have no idea what that's about. Probably he was trying to network with the modeling world. I ran a pageant. People wanted connections. It doesn't mean anything illegal happened." Wiles wanted to believe him, but her political instincts were screaming. "Mr. President, if any of this becomes public without proper context, it will be catastrophic. We need to get ahead of it. Full transparency. Release the documents ourselves with a detailed explanation." "Absolutely not, sir." "Susie, I said no. We're not releasing anything. We're not dignifying this with a response, and we're going to make sure those files stay classified." "You can't classify FBI evidence just because it's embarrassing." "Watch me." That's when Wiles realized Trump wasn't worried about embarrassment. He was worried about something worse. Something he wasn't telling her. Over the next 2 weeks, Wiles watched as Trump made moves to contain the Epstein situation. He called the FBI director privately, something that violated protocol. He asked the White House counsel to explore legal options for keeping the documents sealed. He even floated the idea of replacing the FBI director with someone more loyal. And then he made his biggest mistake. He blamed Susie Wiles. The accusation that broke the trust. It happened during a senior staff meeting on March 28th. Trump was ranting about leaks to the press. Someone had told the New York Times that the FBI was reviewing Epstein materials that included Trump. The story didn't have details, but it was enough to trigger a media frenzy. "Who leaked this?" Trump demanded. "Who's talking to the Times?" Staffers looked at each other nervously. No one answered. Trump's eyes landed on Wiles. "Susie, you were in that FBI meeting. Was it you?" The room went silent. Everyone knew what Trump was doing. He was setting up a scapegoat. Wiles kept her voice calm. "Mr. President, I don't leak to the press. You know that." "Then who did?" "The FBI. Because you're the only one outside the Bureau who knew about this. The White House counsel was also briefed, and you've discussed this with your personal attorney, and you called the FBI director from your personal phone, which isn't secure. Any of those could be sources." Trump's face reddened. "Are you saying I leaked my own story?" "I'm saying there are multiple people who knew about this, and accusing me without evidence is unfair and counterproductive. Maybe you're not the right person for this job anymore." The words hung in the air. It wasn't quite a firing threat, but everyone in the room understood. Trump was considering replacing his chief of staff because she wouldn't help him cover up the Epstein connection. Wiles stood up. "If you want my resignation, Mr. President, ask for it directly. Don't insinuate. Don't blame me for problems I didn't create. And don't expect me to break the law to protect you from your own past." She walked out. Staffers later told reporters it was the most tension they'd ever witnessed between Trump and Wiles. That night, Wiles made a decision. If Trump was going to fire her over this, she needed insurance, she needed leverage, she needed to make sure that firing her would cost him more than keeping her. She called her personal attorney. "I need you to preserve some documents." The insurance policy. What Susie Wiles gave her attorney was a complete record of everything related to Trump and Epstein since she'd taken office. It included the FBI briefing binder, copies of photos, phone records, and financial documents. Technically, these were classified, but Wiles had received them as part of her official duties. Her attorney argued that preserving them was required under federal records law. Contemporaneous memos. After every conversation with Trump about the Epstein issue, Wiles had written detailed memos documenting what was said. "The President asked me to explore keeping FBI files classified. The President suggested replacing the FBI director to control the investigation." These were her notes, her property, email chains, correspondence between Wiles, White House counsel, and the FBI about managing the Epstein materials. These showed Trump's pattern of trying to interfere. Meeting logs, records showing Trump's off-the-books calls to the FBI director and DOJ officials, evidence of potential obstruction. It was a devastating collection. And Wiles's attorney made 3 copies, one in a safe deposit box, one in a secure cloud server, and one with a trusted colleague with instructions to release them if anything happened to Wiles. Then came the hard part. Wiles had to tell Trump what she'd done. She requested a private meeting. April 3rd, 2025. Just the 2 of them in the Oval Office. "Mr. President, we need to clear the air. I know you've been considering firing me. Before you do, I want you to understand something. I've preserved all documents related to our discussions about the Epstein materials. It's required by federal records law. My attorney has them in a secure location." Trump's face went white. "You took classified documents?" "I took documents I received in my official capacity, and I created contemporaneous records of our conversations, which is standard practice for chiefs of staff. These records will remain private as long as I'm in my position. But if I'm fired, especially if it appears to be retaliation for refusing to help cover up sensitive information, my attorney has advised me that I may have a legal obligation to turn them over to congressional oversight committees." "You're blackmailing me." "I'm protecting both of us, Mr. President. If I'm fired and these materials become public, it will be catastrophic for you. And if I stay and continue to serve loyally, none of this ever sees the light of day. It's in both our interests for me to remain in this position." Trump stared at her for a long moment. "Get out." Wiles left. She didn't know if she still had a job, but she'd played her card, and she documented it all in a follow-up email, the email that would leak 6 weeks later. The standoff that consumed Washington. For the next month, an uneasy truce existed. Trump didn't fire Wiles. Wiles didn't leak anything. They functioned professionally in meetings, but the warmth was gone. Everyone in the White House could feel the tension. Then, on May 9th, someone leaked Wiles's email to the Washington Post. The headline, "Chief of Staff threatened Trump with Epstein documents to keep her job." The story had everything. The full text of the email, details about the FBI briefing, background on Trump's efforts to contain the Epstein materials, and, most damaging, confirmation that Wiles had created an insurance policy to protect herself from being fired. The political world exploded. Democrats called it proof of a cover-up. If there's nothing to hide, why is the Chief of Staff threatening to release documents? Asked Senator Chuck Schumer. Republicans tried to spin it as Wiles being the problem. This is insubordination. She should resign, said Senator Ted Cruz. But the real pressure came from an unexpected source: congressional investigators. The House Oversight Committee issued subpoenas for Wiles's documents. The Senate Judiciary Committee opened an inquiry into whether Trump had obstructed justice by trying to keep Epstein files classified. And the DOJ Inspector General launched a review of Trump's contacts with the FBI director. Wiles was in an impossible position. She had the documents. Congress wanted them. Trump was furious, and the media was camped outside her house. She hired a crisis PR firm. She consulted with 3 different attorneys, and she made a decision that would define her legacy. The testimony that ended it all. On May 28, 2025, Susie Wiles appeared before the House Oversight Committee in closed session. She testified for 7 hours, and according to leaks from the hearing, she told them everything. She confirmed the FBI briefing about Trump-Epstein materials. She confirmed Trump's efforts to keep files classified. She confirmed his attempts to pressure the FBI director, and she turned over her contemporaneous memos, all of them. The committee released a summary 2 weeks later. It didn't include the most sensitive details, but it confirmed the White House Chief of Staff has provided testimony and documents showing efforts by the President to limit disclosure of materials related to Jeffrey Epstein. These efforts raise questions about potential obstruction of oversight. Trump issued a furious statement. Susie Wiles is a disgruntled employee who was asked to resign and is now lying to Congress to get revenge. I barely knew Jeffrey Epstein and certainly did nothing wrong. This is another witch hunt. But the damage was done. Wiles had testified under oath. Her memos were now congressional record, and Trump's claim that he barely knew Epstein was contradicted by 60 documented phone calls and multiple photographs. 3 days later, Susie Wiles submitted her resignation. Her statement was brief. I have served the President to the best of my ability, but I cannot continue in a position where I'm asked to compromise my legal and ethical obligations. I hope my testimony helps Congress fulfill its oversight responsibilities. She was the shortest-serving Chief of Staff in modern history. 132 days. Where they are now, Susie Wiles now works as a private consultant. She's been approached about writing a book. She's declined, for now. But her attorney has confirmed the documents are still preserved, in case they're needed for any future legal proceedings. Donald Trump replaced her with a loyalist who lasted 3 months before resigning over a different scandal. The White House Chief of Staff position has become a revolving door. The Epstein documents? Still classified, still hidden. Congressional investigations continue, but Trump's DOJ has blocked most requests. And the question that haunts Washington: What exactly was in those files that made Trump so desperate to keep them hidden? What was worth losing his most effective chief of staff? What secret was worth the risk of obstruction? Susie Wiles knows, and she's made it clear. If Trump ever comes after her, the insurance policy still exists. 1 email, 4 paragraphs, 173 words. That's all it took to prove that even the most loyal aide has a breaking point, and even the most powerful president can be held hostage by the truth.